So I think it's important to start from the beginning. Fascism was a reaction against globalization. It was the claim that one should put one's own country and one's own people first. Fascism put a face on globalization. It said that globalization wasn't just a matter of rules or challenges, but of specific enemies, usually ethnic enemies, often arrayed in some kind of a conspiracy. Fascism said we shouldn't try to understand the world with a reason, but instead rely on faith, not faith in God, but faith in a particular leader. So fascism put emotions ahead of thoughts. It put will ahead of reasonability. Now, this is all very important because these aren't just ideas. These are people, and these are victorious election campaigns, and these are the ends of democracy. Fascists, their followers, by way of elections or other means, are able to overturn democracies throughout Central and Eastern Europe, and we see something like a similar pattern emerging now. There are, I guess, three very important things to keep in mind. The first, which is really important for Americans, is that history doesn't actually have a pattern or a flow. We tend to think that once you have capitalism, you'll get democracy or vice versa or some such thing, and that's just basically nonsense. History doesn't bear that out. You need an awful lot of other conditions in place. You can't take your eye off the ball, in other words. Democracy does actually tend to degrade rather than to support itself. That's a general remark. Second thing is, what you had was obvious inequality as a result of this thing that we now call globalization. There was a Great Depression, there was trade war, there was the experience at both the local and the national level that we should be doing better than we are, which led to counterproductive elections, counterproductive trade policies. But the third thing, which is very important to keep in mind, are in fact the ideas. We've gotten ourselves convinced that ideas don't matter anymore, that all the big ideas have left the framework, which is just not the case. The idea, for example, that truth doesn't matter.
One thing that has been interesting this entire campaign season to watch is that people that say facts are facts, they're not really facts. Everybody has a way. It's kind of like looking at ratings or looking at a glass of half full water. Everybody has a way of interpreting them to be the truth or not truth. There's no such thing, unfortunately, more of fact.
The whole post-factual business that we're now getting used to, that's actually a fascist idea for the 1920s and 1930s, that one should have faith in individuals, one can ignore the facts, right? Those are old ideas. Those are the kinds of ideas which allow regimes to change. I find it very hard to know what the man actually believes, and I would be suspicious of anyone, except perhaps his family and closest friends who would make confident claims about that. But I think that itself is precisely one reason to be concerned. The way fascism works is to deny the importance of consistency, right? And Mr. Trump is someone who has generally taken both sides of every position.
And Hillary, and they were going to Michigan. No, it's okay. No, forget it. That plays great before the election. No, we don't care, right?
I think if you watch the rallies, if you go to the rallies and listen to the rallies, there are some patterns which are quite familiar to those of us who have watched the films or read the transcripts of rallies from the 1920s and 1930s. The first is the total hostility to facts, right? That you just most of the time say things that aren't true.
And yet Obama today spoke in front of a much smaller crowd than this, by the way. And there was a protester, and a protester that likes us. He was talking to the protester, screaming at him, really screaming at him. By the way, if I spoke the way Obama spoke to that protester, they would say, he became unhinged, You have to go back and look.
Listen up. Hey, I told you to be focused, and you're not focused right now. Listen to what I'm saying. Hold up. You've got an older gentleman who is supporting his candidate. He's not doing nothing. First of all, we live in a country that respects free speech. So, second of all, it looks like maybe he might have served in our military, and we got to respect that. Third of all, he was elderly, and we got to respect our elders. And fourth of all, don't boo. Oh.
The second is the kind of shamanistic incantation, which in Trump's case was build that wall.
Build that wall. Build that wall. Build that wall.
And lock her up. Things which are criminal, things which we know are not actually going to happen, but which establish a kind of mystical relationship between the crowd and the person. The third is magical thinking. You know, the constant promise at the rallies that we're going to simultaneously cut taxes, pay off the national debt, increase spending on domestic policy and on defense. We all know that this is impossible, right? But we embrace it. And then finally, the final element, which is very similar to interwar fascist rallies, would be the misplaced faith, where Trump says things like, I alone can solve this.
Which is why I alone can fix it.
Or, I am your voice.
I am your voice.
Which can lead people to confuse their faith in the leader with truth, or can lead people to abandon their own claim to individually discern what's actually going on. That's very similar, and that's alarming.